Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Dirty Basement Terrain, coming at you with another one. Now, a while ago, I converted this Dollar Tree dollhouse into this. Nice little dollhouse, small, nice little cottage style house, but I went from this to this. Now, Dollar Tree made two different styles of dollhouses. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the other style, or at least two of them, in any of my local Dollar Trees. But due to the kindness of one of my patrons, thank you, Dungeon Matron, I was sent several of the second style. So, I want to show you how I went from this style of dollhouse to this. I said, I tried different colors and a few different things that even used a product I never used before. Though it's been around for a while, I just never used it. But I said, I want to show you how I went from this to this. But before we get to it, I want to say a big thanks to all my patrons. With your guys' continued help, it makes doing these videos over and over again, and especially when I get that stuff that I can't find in my local area. But thank you, Dungeon Matron, Corel, Me Geeked, and Sykes. I greatly appreciate your guys' help. I really do help. Thank you. Let's get to it. Okay, I've got a couple actually here that's still in the package, but here's one I've already started working on. And they got these little tabs I need to remove so they'll actually sit flat, sit flat together. Like I just do a couple test fits, make sure there's no areas I need to trim up to make them sit flush together. Now, also what I want to do is I don't plan on using the windows they came with, so I need to pop all these windows and the door and everything off. Don't throw them out just because you don't need them for this particular project doesn't mean they won't be useful for a project down the road. And double checking to make sure they still fit pretty flush together, and they're fine. Now, what I want to do is just give everything a good sanding over, just so the paint will actually adhere, and also any kind of glue I stick to it. Because these houses aren't made to be painted, so a little work is going to be needed, at least in what I plan on doing to it. So just a piece of sandpaper and then sand all the surfaces that are to be painted down. Just not that you actually see any of these surfaces, but I still want to do everything I can. Now here I had already rattle canned everything because you know how to rattle can primer stuff. And I also stuck the triangle windows back in to say, you know what, I want to use these. Right now I want to actually start covering certain areas up because I don't want two doors for this project. And a lot of the inside windows will get covered up too. But I'm just using a piece of cardstock that I got out of a box of cat food for my cats. And this will work perfect. You can use some graphics, some chipboard to do the same thing, but this was free. And I just needed to cover spaces up, nothing else. So I'm going to go with the cheap garbage. Now that I've got my cardstock cut up and ready to go, just slap down some super glue quick and then just place it. Now I don't plan on doing interior lighting on this build. I rarely do. So I'm actually going to be covering up the inside of the windows so no light will actually shine through. This will just make it easier for me for later when I go to actually start painting. I don't have to worry about what the inside looks like. I rarely do, so I'm just cutting up some of that cardstock I had from the cat food and just cutting up small spaces that I can actually glue in place over the inside of the windows. And once I give it a primer, the cardboard will go black on the outside, so easy peasy. And of course, with these triangle windows, I have to trim it a little bit and then glue it in. But now that I've got that all done, I'm going to glue these two halves together. And for this, instead of standard super glue, I'm going with gel just so it'll fill in some cracks, hopefully. But it's a quick, easy process. Now, for the windows on the first floor, I'm actually using this wooden fan, like folding fan that was sent to me by Dungeon Matron. She said, do something with this. Well, it's going to be window treatment because it had a really neat pattern to it. So I'm just actually starting to trim it down so it'll fit inside the windows and do several test fits, trying to cut the little curve there. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not actually measuring it yet. That's why I'm constantly doing the test fitting. Just cut small amounts off till it fits in how I like it. And then boom, I will be done, and I'll have a nice little window treatment that actually looks kind of cool. Of course, using PVA, brush it in, and that part of it's done. Now, I keep a good supply of thinly cut strips of foam, typically between a 1/4 inch and smaller, 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by however long. And that's what I'm using here, a small piece that I just have left over from other projects. And I'm actually forming it, bending it, and curving it to make a window frame. That's the thing about working with XPS. Once you cut it thin enough, it is very flexible and won't break, as long as you take a little care. And of course, now I got to glue on the bottom part of the window frame, and boom, this is pretty easy. Just a straight across, no bends, no nothing. Cut it, let it sit to dry. Now here I'm actually using a piece of cardstock again, and I'm going to be measuring out a base for the door, which I will be gluing all the foam and everything to. I think I went with like 1 3/4 inches by 1.5 inches. I'm not sure, but if you're not sure what measurements to go with for a door, just keep a miniature at hand, like I just did there. And check the size until it's the right size for the miniature that the miniature can actually go through. Not that they'll ever be going through inside this house, but to scale it a little bit better, just keep a miniature on hand so you make sure you're not making it too small or too big. But again, this is just a simple piece of cardstock I got out of a box of cat food. Trimming it up so it actually looks okay, and then boom. Now, I keep these 3x3 squares of thin cut foam on hand. I have a big stack of them on my table for times like this. I just go ahead and I texture it up with my plastic brush there, give it some wood grain, put a little PVA into my pop-it toy there, and this is a pretty simple process. Just glue on some to the actually back of the door, and then I'll attach it to the foam. First major part of making the door is done. I know some people like to do individual slats. I don't. Honestly, I just don't. I like doing it this way, that way. I'm not trying to match up, individual slats to the door. This way, boom, I got the whole thing covered with wood. Now, I've already textured the individual planks with a pencil, and I need some cross beam bars to actually hold the door together. So I'm just using that rest of that foam there and just smushing it as much as I can, making it as thin as I possibly can. Just beating the ever-loving heck out of it and thinning it out as much as possible. And I'm going to cut some, eyeball some strips. Yeah, that looks good. And I'm going to make sure it's actually long enough. Trim off mark it. Trim off the little extra bit there. And then I'm going to actually cut little points into the end, just for aesthetic reasons. I could go with a straight square, but this just looks, aesthetically, the points or rounded ends kind of look better, at least for me. Now, once I got that done, a little more glue, and I'll just paint the backs of these beam or bars and then glue it onto the door. Now, the last piece of foam that I need to add to this door is the back plate for the door handle. Of course, I'll do that after this, but I'll cut another strip out, roughly the same length as the support beams there, but I want it to be in like a square shape, like I'm cutting right here. This is all eyeballing. I'm not making any measurements. Cut a nice little flat square. Get a little dab of glue there. Now, placing it with the fingers, it's a little difficult, so I just use my X-Acto blade just to like pierce it and then put it in place. And then once I'm happy with how it looks, hands off and leave it alone. Now that I got it's all dry, I actually want to put the handle on. Now I keep a good supply of pre-made handles that I made out of some jewelry stuff I got at the jewelry section. I think at Michael's, honestly. But they just look like little round hanging door handles. Just I want to drill a hole through the entire thing. You dab a little glue in it and push it through, and it's on. And I have a medieval door handle. Now that the door itself is complete, as far as building goes, I want to actually put it in place, use some PVA, put it to where the door is supposed to go, slap it on, adjust it. And that's why I like using PVA at times. And boom, I'm done. Now I have a lot of timber work I want to do on this, so I grabbed out of my pre-cut supply of timbers, I guess you would call it, and I just start texturing it up. Anything that needs a wood grain pattern, I'm doing that now. And anywhere I want a timber to actually sit, to make it for supports, anywhere I think it looks good or should belong, I'm just going to stick there. This is also a nice way to hide seams and cracks and whatnot. And like I said, using hot glue, trim it off, add more to where I think it looks good, and just continue on until I'm happy with how it eventually looks. It's a simple, easy process, especially if you have all the actual beams pre-cut. And here I'm actually adding into the door frame. This is a smaller piece. I didn't add any texture to this because in my mind I wanted to go for like almost a stone look for some reason, because I planned on painting the door frame itself gray as well as the window frame. So I figured, okay, I don't have to actually texture these pieces, so it's just basically putting a bead of hot glue, laying it in place, and done. Now of course I'm still adding timbers to all the areas I think it could go, just to break up the monotony of what I'm going to be doing in a little while. Anywhere and everywhere I think, yeah, that looks like a good place for a piece of wood. I said wood. But, and then just trimming them flush to the bottom of the building. Pretty simple. Now with this one I actually decided to use some planking instead of my standard stucco. The planks I actually made by just grabbing an off-cut piece of foam and cutting out some thin strips and then texturing them with the brush, the same as I did the timber itself. And now I'm just proceeding to glue them on with some PVA and just each row, successive row put on. It's not that hard, really. I mean, the most difficult part, as I'm showing right now, is trying to get into the small places and actually trimming the planks to fit, around curves and corners, like at the top of the window right here. But other than that, this is actually a relatively simple and easy way to cover up the sides of a building like this. Will I ever use this method again? Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. After doing this building, it's like I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'm still going to fall back on my standard stucco, but I actually really enjoyed doing this, so I will be using it. Now, with a lot of the timber work, I wasn't entirely happy with how it was turning out. There were too many, big pieces, small pieces right up against each other, and there were seams and cracks. I just wasn't fully satisfied, so I took some of the timber, the planking, and just glued over top of it, and boom, it solved the issue that I wasn't entirely happy with. Now I got to make a bunch of shingles. I've already run the foam through my shingle jig, and here I'm actually texturing it, so I don't have to worry about texturing it once I slice it. It's just easier this way. For me it is. And I've already set my guide to the proper thickness that I want. I've got a couple of these made, because trust me when I say this, regardless of whether you're doing individual shingles or using a shingle jig like I'm doing, once you think you've got enough shingles cut, double that amount and cut twice as much. Trust me, if you don't cut twice of what you think you need, you'll run out and have to cut out more anyway. But what I'm doing here is I actually, in between each cut, I'm texturing the sides. That way, again, so I don't have to worry about texturing it later. And now I'm just actually running the shingles on the roof. I've already done one half of the roof, and right now I'm cutting it to angle it so it will fit against, whatever parts of the roof stick out, whether it be the two little triangle pieces or that big piece that hangs over the door. That's the most frustrating part of actually doing this, is just trying to cut the strips of shingles so they'll fit naturally around different pieces of the roof that stick out like this. I mean, this is a piece of plastic that I'm trying to turn into something cool, so these are just little annoyances that you just got to deal with. But again, it's like just trim it so it actually fits and then put it on. But you also want to make sure that when you're doing shingles that each row is offset from the one below, so you don't have like a single seam running through, because shingles aren't done like that, mainly to protect the house from rain. But again, trim, put a bead of hot glue down, and then put them in place. And then cover your whole roof. So I've actually cut this piece of foam at an angle already to match the angle of the end of the roof, because I'm going to be building a fireplace that's coming out of the end of the house and not just attached to the end of the house like I do often. I'm just trying to actually get this to match up to the roof itself, and I'm trimming off that end a little bit because I want it to stick up just a little bit, and you'll see why eventually. But here I'm actually marking out. It's like, oh wait, I want to make sure that the ends here, before I do any cutting for the chimney itself, are flat and just match up pretty nice. Again, doing another test fit, marking where the chimney is going to be with my fingernail. I just need a little mark to figure out how wide it's going to be. Cut the width out, pretty simple. And I have the base for my chimney, at least the top part of the chimney. Now, the angle doesn't quite match, so the chimney was a little crooked, so I needed to cut a little more extra off for the angle. And just kind of eyeball it, cut a little more off. Again, this is my cut small amounts off to a test fit idea. That way you won't get screwed if you cut too much off. Now I'm happy with how that looks. Now I actually want the top part of the chimney itself to be much smaller than the base part. So I'm using the grid line on my Proxon just to get an idea of where the chimney, the top part of the chimney will be. And just cutting it out with my X-Acto blade here. Pretty simple. Not too overdone or complicated. Not measure this, measure that, calculate, the distance of the sun to, the moon. Nah. And I want there to be an angle so it looks like it goes up in a gradual build. Pretty simple. Now I grab one of those blanks that I keep on hand, and I'm going to use that to cover up the wall. Now I'm just using some sandpaper to round off the sharp point edges to the chimney and just make it more smooth and natural look. Just to make it look a little more natural and not quite so fake, I guess. But I'm going to use a pencil here, and I'm going to be carving in a cobblestone look to it instead of, my standard brick pattern that I like to use. Like I said, this house was me trying to get out of my comfort zone of just, hey, here's another thing of exactly what I've done a couple times before. I wanted to try a few different things that I don't normally do, so cobblestone chimney. Then I've got that part of the chimney up and glued on. I want to actually get the bottom part. Now I'm using that one of the blanks that I normally use to cover up the side of the wall, just to trim a little. It's a little too wide, so just trim off a little bit. And I wanted to make it match the bottom of the chimney there. Pretty simple idea. Add a bunch of hot glue quick. And this is why I didn't bother blocking out those two windows, because they're going to get covered up completely anyway. Glue it down. Trim off that bottom part to make it flush. Add a little bit of glue there because I didn't get it all. and that's it. I mean, it's not hard. Now I'm going to grab my pencil and continue the cobblestone pattern. Now, the places where the windows, you got to be careful how hard you press or you're going to punch right through the foam. But again, I'm just continuing the cobblestone pattern. And yes, I do realize there is that massive seam line where the two things meet. But don't worry, I'll fix that later. Now, for all the corners of the building, and anywhere there's like seams that I'm not entirely happy with, I'm actually taking some of the planking material, and being that it's so thin, it actually curves and bends pretty easily. So I'm just covering up the corners of the shingles and stuff real quick and easy just by curling up the foam, the plank material, and boom, done. And I've done that all over the building, cover up the roof, covering up seams. I really liked how that wound up looking. Now, to cover up the edges of that front part that hangs over the door, I'm just going to use a piece of the plank, and it still bends quite a bit. Not quite as much as I want before it rips, but I'll put a piece of hot glue there and then just curl the plank to however I need it, and then I'll trim it to fit. And then I'll go and do the same with the other side. Now, this is something I honestly just forgot to do prior to gluing it all on. Using a foil ball to texture the stonework of the chimney prior to actually doing everything else. But, still managed to remember to do it. So, I've already primered this black. And now I'm actually adding a base coat color to everything. Red for the tiles, brown for all the woodwork, or the rest of the woodwork. I'm going to be doing gray for the minor stonework, the stonework on it, but just a dark version of all these three different colors. You want to get 100% of your base coat. Now on to the mid-tone, which, basically it's just a lighter version of your first color. For the roof tiles, I went with a dark brownish red. Now I'm into like a mid-tone, like brownish, like reddish brown. And this is a pretty simple method. Dark, medium, and light. And now that I've gotten all the mid-tone brushing done, I'm doing the light dry brush highlight. And for the roof tiles, it's a bright red. Well, then the light dry brush for the highlight color is just exactly that. It's a really light dry brush just to make all the details pop. And I'm going to be doing that with all three of the different colors, base colors I'm using: red, brown, and gray. Now, I wasn't entirely happy with the highlight color for the tiles, or the roof tiles. So I actually mixed some pink with the bright red just to make it pop even more. And I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. The bright red just wasn't enough of a pop to make all the details stand out. So like I said, I mixed a 50-50 mix of the bright red and a pink color, just to lighten up the highlight even more so. Now, to give the chimney a little more visual interest, rather than just having a solid, boring, gray stonework chimney, I'm picking out individual stones and painting them with different colors. You know, colors you'll find in nature: browns, grays, greens. You can even go out if you want to and go some wacky colors like bright neon green if you know. But this is just to give the chimney a little more visual interest, because if I didn't do this, the overall look would just be boring. It really would. So I'm picking out individual stones just to change it and give it a much more visual interest. Now, I'm going over everything now with a mid-tone gray, because I got to do the chimney, so I'm just doing all the other areas that are stone, like the windows, the door frames, and then the chimney itself. This is a mid-tone paint job, so roughly 80-85% coverage. And as you can see, it's actually starting to cover up the different stones that I painted different colors. So it's not quite, while it's still visually interesting, it's not quite so in your face. And now for the highlight dry brush for all the stonework. And this will cover up those different stones in the chimney even more, just to make them a little more subtle, but still there. And all the door frames and the windows as well. This is just a highlight color, just to make it pop a little bit more and give it a little bit of visual interest. And it looks pretty. Now here there's a couple spots I actually want to have a metallic color to, and like these pieces that pop out for the triangle windows and that big piece over the door and in the back, I'm painting a antique copper color. Saying, that's a color that they would use in medieval times. Maybe. I don't know, this is fantasy, so who cares? Now that I've got all the different brass or copper places done, I'm going to give a lot of it basically a quick highlight overbrush with a gold color, so it's not one solid color. Again, I think I'm using a rose gold just to highlight all the copper pieces, just to make it pop a little bit more. Now this is something a product I've never actually used before, but a friend of mine gave me a bunch of Citadel paints recently. And one of them was the Citadel Technical, I am not pronouncing that name, oxide. So I just painted over all the metallic parts with it, like the videos I watched said to do, and then wipe the excess away, leaving it in the cracks and recesses. So paint it on, grab a crafter's good friend Q-tips, and then wipe away the excess where I don't want it to sit and dry and do its magic. And I was actually really happy with how it turned out. Well, we did not expect this. Now, all the first floor windows for all those treatments I give, I'm just using in a gunmetal gray. paint just to give it like an iron bar look to it. I thought about doing the copper, but then I was like, I want it to look a little different. And I didn't want to do the oxide in the windows. Not that window, the first 4 windows anyway, so. Gunmetal gray metallic it is. Well, this XPS shingles are delicate, and I broke one of them off in the process of painting. So do a quick dab of hot glue and then stick it back in place. And honestly, once that kind of repair is done, you will not even notice if it's done correctly. Actually, if I had not been showing you guys this, you would never even know that I had broken one of them off. But I did, and I'm going to show it. But it was a quick, easy repair. And I could have kept this secret to myself, but I just didn't want to. As you can see, though, it was a quick, easy fix and nothing to get upset about. I want to dirty and dinge it up and accentuate the shadows and cracks and crevices a little bit, so I'm using my homemade dark brown wash and just coating everything with it. And I mean everything, including the copper pieces and the chimney, the wood planking, everything. I want to give it basically a shade and make the crevices and pop a little more. And just to give it a little bit of a dirty, dingy look to it. At least that's what I tell myself. Of course, after, the wash dry, I realized, oh, I forgot to paint the windows on these windows on the second floor. Oops. So I grabbed the gunmetal gray metallic quick and just painted them up. No harm, no foul. Quick and easy done. But, oops! Now that the wash is completely dry, I need to go back and bring up the highlights again. And I'm using the last highlight color that I used prior to doing the wash. For the tiles, I'm using that pink, bright red mix. The wood, I'm going to use my lightest color, and the stone, I'm going to use the light gray. Pretty simple. But I'm actually leaving all the copper pieces alone, because I think they look just fine the way they are, so... Now I'm going to be adding some homemade pigment powder to different places. For the top of the chimney, I'm using a black pigment powder, to represent the soot and the smoke that had been coming out. Everywhere else, I'm going to be using a dark brown pigment powder just to accentuate shadows and dirt, anywhere where it may have gathered in the corners, the bottom of the door, the bottom of the building, all around, just anywhere that it looks like it should be, and it will also make it pop just a little bit more. Visually, could you get away with not doing this? Yeah, but if you do this, it'll just make it look all that more better, or much more special, adding shadows and stuff like that. Yeah, I know this is just a piece of terrain, but if you can do a simple, easy little step like this, go ahead and do it. And like I said, this is homemade pigment powder. It's not the expensive pre-made stuff, so why not? And once I'm done adding all the pigment powders to where I want, I'll just hit it with a quick mist of some isopropyl alcohol, and it'll set in place, and that way it won't rub off. Yeah, granted, using the alcohol will make it lose some of the dusty appearance, but at least it'll stay there and stick on and not rub off easily. Now let's add some moss paste. I like adding moss paste because it just gives it a little more visual interest to the building, makes it pop even more. I also like adding it because I can use it to hide screw-ups and mistakes, like that big seam that in the chimney. Would moss grow in a chimney? Maybe. I hope so, because I just put a bunch of it on there. But also put it in places that it looks like it belongs, you know, cracks, crevices, anywhere like moisture may have gathered. But moss paste will just make the building visually more interesting than it would be without it. So, and that's the primary reason I add it, just to make it pop even more. And it's really not that difficult of a step to do. Now, I'm using a coffee stir stick to place it. I've also used old beater brushes to place it in different spots. It just really helps. It makes the building, for me, it makes the building visually more interesting. Now, once I actually get all this moss paste placed, say that 10 times fast, I'll use some fine yellow flocking from Woodland Scenics and sprinkle it from above wherever the paste is, and that gives it like a highlight and breaks up just the green of the moss paste itself. It just makes it pop a little bit more. At least I think so. And here it is in all its glory. I'm really happy with how it did. And you know, I tried to do stuff that took me out of my comfort zone with this, especially with the brighter colors than my normal builds. And I am very happy with how it turned out. Will I do another one in a similar fashion? Yeah, eventually I will, because I'm very happy with it, and I like it. I hope you do too. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you're watching it, and as always, I really do appreciate it. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out, and thanks to the Dungeon Matron, I have several of these now, so I can make more. And this will look good when it plops down onto the table. If you guys liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe. I plan on continuing to making videos. If you want to get a hold of me directly, there's a link to the Discord and also in Patreon if you want to give the channel a helping hand. As always, guys, like I said, I really like how this turned out. I like using oxidation effects. I will continue to use it in future projects when I do a metallic, like I did with this. But in the end, guys, remember, when you're making your terrain or houses or whatever, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.